Welcome everyone. This is Valerie Wendt at Surgent CPA Review. Thank you for joining the webinar this afternoon. We're going to be talking about some changes that are happening to the exam yet again, and what you need to know about those as you move forward in your exam preparation. As we go through the webinar today, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A box that you could submit your questions. You can also submit those questions through the chat feature. And I will be addressing those questions as we move through the webinar today. The webinar should not last too long. There's not a lot of significant changes going on in 2018, so hopefully I'll be done here shortly and you'll be able to get back to your day. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. And again, thanks for joining. So the exam is changing, as I mentioned. I wanted to, before I get into some of those changes, just to kind of remind you about the exam sections and our recommended sequence in taking those sections. And this still holds true even with the changes that are going on right now. We always have recommended and continue to recommend that you study first and test for financial accounting and reporting. This section tends to be the underlying base root of knowledge that's necessary even for the other exam sections. So if you can get through FAR, it certainly will help you as you study and prepare for the remaining three sections. Followed by FAR, we suggest ODD, followed by, and then REG, and then BEC. Depending on your area of expertise, if you're working in a firm at this time, if you're in the tax area, you may want to swap ODD and REG around. It really doesn't matter for those two particular ones what order you take those in. And people do tend to want to leave BEC for the last. That is the one section that tends to, people go in assuming it's probably going to be the easiest, but it does cover information that you may not have had in your college studies since early in your college days. So some of it may take you a little bit of time to refresh. The hours that we've noted there after each section is the recommended study time if you were using the Surgent CPA Review platform. Because our platform is adaptive, we're helping to shorten study time, and therefore these are pretty accurate study hours based on what we're seeing our students doing in our program. These hours would probably double if you're using another review course. And hopefully you are using Surgent. If not, we certainly would welcome you to come on board. So just briefly looking at the testing window, this is for 2018. So the testing window, we're in the testing window right now. We're actually at the start of the second month of the window. The window started January 1st and is going to go up till March the 10th. And you'll notice that each testing window throughout 2018 extends 10 days into that third month of the quarter. And that's probably going to be the norm going forward. And then the blackout periods are the remainder of that month. This is so the AICPA can refresh the content. As a reminder, you have 18 months to complete all four parts in most jurisdictions. And that 18-month clock starts on the day of the exam section when you pass it. It doesn't start on the day you get your score. It goes back to the day you actually tested for that exam. So keep that in mind as you're planning out your strategy in when you're going to be sitting for these sections. The structure, this is the change that went into effect as of last April. So each of the four sections is now 4 hours long, and they each contain 5 testlets. The first 2 testlets in each section are the multiple choice questions. And you can see by section the number of multiple choice questions in each area. The remaining 3 testlets are task-based simulation questions. And note, even in BEC, there are 2 testlets of simulation questions, task-based sims, and a third testlet of written communication simulations. So you're still seeing those questions. They implemented a new standardized 15-minute break that takes place between testlet number 3 and testlet number 4. This is optional for you to take, although most people like to take it. It is the one break that the clock stops. So you're able to get up, run to the restroom, get a drink of water without impacting your testing time. The time periods between each testlet are still available for you to take optional breaks, but the clock does not stop. So your clock keeps ticking even if you step away from the computer in between those testlets. So that's between testlet 1 and 2, between 2 and 3, and between 4 and 5. The weighting on the exam changed last April as well with the implementation of simulations in BEC, as well as more complicated simulations in the other sections. So in audit, FAR, and reg, it's a 50-50 split between multiple choice and simulations. Excuse me. In BEC, it's a 50% scoring on multiple choice questions, 35% on the simulation questions, and 15% on the written communication questions. Additionally, as of last April, they started testing some new skill levels. Prior to last April, testing encompassed only the remembering and understanding skill and the application skill. Application skill was predominantly in the simulation questions. As of last April, they added the analysis skill level and the evaluation skill level. Note that the evaluation skill level is only tested in auditing. And that makes sense because that's what you're called on to do as an auditor, is to be able to examine and assess problems and use some judgment to draw conclusions. So evaluation and analysis are going to be tested predominantly through the simulation type questions that you're going to see. Now, you do need to know that the exam continues to include pre-test questions on the exam, and 15 to 20% of those questions on the exam are pre-test questions. So those do not count against your score. However, you are not going to know which questions are pre-test questions. The AICPA puts these on in order for them to test out new items that they want to add to the exam. They're trying to determine whether or not candidates show a significant amount of difficulty with the question, whether the question is ambiguous. So they will take the results of these pre-test questions and then make changes if necessary before they push those questions live into the exam. Now, as far as your time strategy, now that the exam is 4 hours for each part, this is just some recommended times. Generally we tell people, when you're working multiple choice questions, you should be working those questions at about a minute to a minute and a half per question. And so if you're like watching the clock, especially in auditing back and FAR, you should be spending about 45 minutes in each of those first 2 testlets. In reg, because there are a few more multiple choice, it may take you a few minutes longer, so we got 48 minutes there. And then leaving the rest of your exam time to cover those simulation questions. If you can get through the simulations faster than that, that just leaves you that much more time to work those simulation questions. But you need to get to a place where you can manage your time very well. And I've got some, I think I put in here some ideas as far as how to tackle those multiple choice and simulation questions. Other study considerations you should do as you're preparing for the exam is you need to figure out a way to study on average 15 to 20 hours a week. Now, for some people that may seem like that's a lot of time. So you can kind of break it down per day, looking at your work schedule and other commitments that you may have. See where you can find hours during the day so that you're not spending a large amount of time on the weekends, but your weekends may be your main study time. And then you also need to figure out if you need a day off. I always recommend to candidates, especially if you have some time before your exam is approaching, to try not to study 7 days a week. It's beneficial to you if you can take a day off. That way you can kind of relax and refresh so that when you come back the next day, you're ready to go again. It may be, though, that your exam is quickly approaching and you can't afford to take a day off. But here at Surgent, especially if you're a student here, we can help you in creating your study plan for your test day. Now, multiple choice strategy. As I mentioned, you're going to probably want to get to a place where you're spending about a minute to a minute and a half on each of the multiple choice questions. So things that you need to know as you enter these testlets is you never want to leave a question blank. The exam is positively graded, so that means even if you don't answer it, you're going to get it wrong. You've got a 25% chance of getting a multiple choice question right, so you might as well take advantage of that. So never leave a question blank. Don't skip questions. Just if you get to a question that you don't quite understand, use your best guess and flag that question. Keep an eye on the clock. And if you've not used up your 45 minutes, for example, you can go back and review those flagged questions. If you're at time and you need to move on, you're going to have to leave your guess as your guess and move on. Your goal is to try and get through the multiple choice questions as quickly as possible. Therefore, when you get to the simulations, here's some recommended ideas for timing the answering to your simulation questions. So there's 5 total types of simulation questions. There's the task-based simulation question. This is the regular sim that's been on the exam all the time. You're going to spend anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes on each of those questions, and you can probably know that you're going to get at least 2, maybe 3 of these types of questions in each of the exam sections of each of the 4 parts. Then they have what we're calling the enhanced task-based sims. Now, enhanced is our terminology, not the AICPA's, but these are the more complicated simulations that have many more exhibits to them. And you could spend anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes on each of those questions. So you can see why we suggest you try and give yourself as much time as possible in those last 3 sims. You probably will get at least 1, perhaps 2 of these on your exam. The document review simulation, this is the DRS. This was implemented back in July of 16, so it's been on the exam for a while. These are the simulation questions where you're given a scenario and you're asked to look at the highlighted and underlined statements within that written document to determine whether or not the statement is accurate. And your choices would be to leave the statement, delete the statement, or change the statement to some recommended, and they'll give you some suggestions. You'll spend about 15 to 30 minutes on each of those questions, and you're going to get at least 1. You could get 2. Written communication questions, they only reside in BEC, so they're still only in BEC. You'll have 3 of them. One of those written communications will be a pre-test question, guaranteed. So only 2 of the 3 are scored for you. But that doesn't mean that you should do any less on the 3rd or the 1st. You never know which of the 3 is the pretest, so do your best. Write well, stay on topic, and you'll score lots of points. The research simulation question is probably the easiest of the simulation questions. You'll only spend about 10 minutes on those simulation questions. And note that you're only going to see research sims in FAR, Aud, and Reg. You will not see a research sim in BEC. You'll get 1 to 2 of those. If you get 2, you're lucky. That just kind of gives you an idea on how to tackle the simulation questions. Now, as you get into the testlets, because you're only seeing a small subset of all of the simulations in a testlet, for example, you may only see 2 in that first simulation testlet. If you don't see a research sim there, you're probably going to get it in a later testlet. If you don't see one of those enhanced task-based sims, you're guaranteed to get at least 1 in one of those later testlets. So just keep that in mind as you're working through. So let's now talk about what's going on this year. It's supposed to go live April 1st of 2018. The changes going on this year are predominantly user experience. They're going to improve your experience at the exam, and that's good news. I mean, we just went through a major content shift last year. The last thing that you would want to see is another major content overhaul. So these are improvements to the exam. It's going to be an updated software design, some enhancements to the technology, some larger monitors. So basically what you're going to see is a Windows-based software So if you're used to opening up multiple windows on your computer and putting them side by side and comparing them, you're going to be able to do that same thing in the exam. There's going to be more intuitive numeric entries, better searches in the authoritative literature, a more modernized design, optimized for those 23 high definition monitors. And they're also improving the support that they're extending to those with disabilities. So the Windows-based software, so this is going to mainly be in the simulation questions. So the simulation questions that have exhibits, right now, you have to open each exhibit one at a time. It's quite cumbersome and it's time consuming. With this new experience, you're going to be able to open all of the exhibits and put them in this workspace. To the right, your screen will split, and on the right will be your workspace. And you'll be able to open up all those exhibits and tile them and move them around, which is going to be very nice so that you can just glance at them and be able to maneuver through those. With regard to the more intuitive numeric entry, so any simulation question that has a cell that you have to enter in a number, the cell is going to already be formatted for the placement of decimals and commas. So you just need to type the number. Right now, you have to figure out, do I need to type 1,000 with 1 comma 000.00? Going forward, you can just type 1000, and the system will actually format it for you. That's good. It's going to be a time-saving feature. It'll take the guesswork out of how they want to see the number. That's good news too. Within the authoritative literature, they're implementing some new search changes, more enhanced here. So they're introducing what's called the RIA search wildcards. So basically, the basic search will only look for a word. You will be able to search numbers. You're going to be able to search within a selected search area. The asterisk will be able to look for anything starting with the word. The question mark character will search, will be a character search, again, looking within words. You can use it more than once. The quotation marks are going to ask the search to look for an exact phrase or grouping of words. And then the hyphen or the colon or the exclamation point is going to be treated as a space if you're wanting to do some more advanced searching. Within the exhibits, you're going to have the ability to highlight. So that way, if you're looking at multiple exhibits and you're wanting to draw attention to specific parts of those exhibits, so when you're trying to figure out what to use for your answer, you can highlight actually within those exhibits. You'll be able to highlight and you'll be able to remove highlighting. You'll also you'll see some exhibits will be images. This will mainly be in the reg area when they're putting reg forms in there. On exhibits, you're not going to be able to copy them. You can't highlight them. They will note you will see that it's only read only. So you'll know that you're not going to be able to do any copying or highlighting from that. But it basically will be an image that you can reference. Also coming in April, which is most people I've talked to thinks this is excellent news, is the implementation of Excel. Right now, it's an Excel-like spreadsheet. Can't do much with it. But come April, actually Excel will be implemented into each test. So that will allow you to actually utilize that spreadsheet and calculate formulas, however you want to use it. So it's going to replace that generic tool that's in there right now. So you should have familiarity with Excel through your university classes and within your workspace. However, it is not going to test your Excel abilities. It's really there for a tool for you to use. So take advantage of that. Now, breaking news, this just came out this week. And I've had a lot of questions with regard to the new tax law that was signed into law at the end of last year. Typically, when tax changes take place, they become testable 6 months after that date. So generally, every July, you see tax changes on the exam. This year, there will be some changes in July, the normal changes for inflation, for example. Those will be implemented in July as normal. No change there. But the new tax law itself is not going to be tested until January 2019. So that should cause you to hoop and holler. That's good news. That law is just so large. The AICPA needed just a little bit of time to be able to get through that and determine how they're going to begin testing that. So if you're going to test for reg this year, I highly recommend you get it done before the end of this year so that you won't be tested on this new tax law. And again, it may go back to the order of your testing, get far out of the way, and you may want to jump to reg just to make sure you get it done. And in the event that you do need to retake it, hopefully not, you still will have a window to be able to retake it and still not be subject to the new tax law. Now, score release timeline. Anytime they make changes to the exam, there's always some concern about how they're going to release the scores. So right now in this current testing window, in fact, they just released scores yesterday. If you take your test between now and the end of this month, you'll get your scores about March the 8th. If you test the last 10 days of the month up till March 10th, those scores are going to be released on or about March the 20th. Now come April, when the new user experience changes take place, they are going to go back to holding the scores, but it won't be like last year. So it's not that significant of a delay. So all scores will be released at the same time no matter when you test in the April-May window. So the odd, far, and reg scores will be released on or about June 27th, BEC June 29th. So if you test at the end of the April-May window, which remember goes all the way up to June the 10th, you're only going to have to wait a couple weeks. If you test early in April, you are going to have to wait to the third week of June or last week of June to get your scores. They're going to hold the scores again in July, August window. Those scores will all drop at the same time on or about September the 19th. And they're doing the same for the October, November window. So scores will be released mid-December, all at one time again. And they do this just to make sure there's no abnormalities in the scoring as a result of the changes taking place on the exam. So that's the reason that they do that. And then they'll finally, after this cycle of windows goes through, they'll get back to their normal score release timeline, which is typically within just a couple weeks of your sitting date. So that really is the bulk of the changes that are taking place this year. I am happy to answer questions for you. So if you have any, please feel free to submit those. A question did come in for the user experience changes, wanting to know if Surgent's pre-tests will incorporate these changes so that you can practice. Yes, they will be. We're working on that right now. And so those we'll be pushing those changes out probably sometime in the March time period. We don't want to impact people that are testing right now up through March the 10th, but we will be pushing out those, mainly the windows tiling, those ability for you to maneuver the exhibits. You're going to be able to do that in our software. So yes, Kelly, those changes are coming. Somebody asked what the difference is between the task-based sim and the enhanced task-based sim. It's mainly comes down to the number of exhibits. The more enhanced sims are going to have multiple exhibits. Typically, a standard sim has a couple of exhibits. You easily could see 4, 5, 6 exhibits. I think they've planned for the workspace will hold up to 8 exhibits. So it will take you longer you just have to look through all those exhibits in order to find your answer. So that's what makes them a little bit more complicated in order for you to get through them. A question had come in about if you had already ordered your materials, will you get any of the updates? Automatically, yes. We push these updates out to anybody who's in the course. So it's not based on when you buy it. If you have access to the materials, you will automatically get those updates. And as I mentioned, the next round of updates that we'll be pushing will probably be in the March time period. I'm happy to send out these slides, by the way, to everybody so you can review these. There's some nice timeline strategies in there that you may want to refer to in your own planning for the exam, so I'm happy to share that information with you. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any more. As I noted, it's a pretty short, session. It's not as significant of changes that took place in 2017. That's good news for you. So you can just kind of get into the rhythm of getting through this content. The user experience changes they're going to do nothing but help you. They should not hinder you. And you should be really comfortable in this new Windows-based environment that this exam is going to. So we're excited about that. That's all I have for you today. We will be following up with you. If you think of any questions, here is my contact information. If you want to email me, you can email me directly at wentv@surgent.com. Happy to answer any of your questions. Don't hesitate. So I will be letting you have the rest of your afternoon. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. And I look forward to helping you all pass the CPA exam. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining. Bye-bye.